What's going on, irregulars? Welcome back on another Thursday. Do you hear that beat in the background, baby?
Hey, baby. Finally, we have some intro music. I do want to shout out to Danny for helping us mix something together and hooking us up with that. That was really cool of him. We are excited for finally having intro and outro music.
Yes, we are so excited to have music from a good friend of ours from high school. I think you actually went to middle school with him, right?
Yeah, I think I may even went to elementary school.
Yeah, so a longtime friend. His
Yeah.
name is Dan LeBate. He is a producer. He's living in Nashville. Hopefully at some point I can go out to visit him. But in the meantime, he hooked us up with that great beat. If anyone is in need of any kind of music production, his Instagram handle is at D.L.Productions. I'm not going to spell productions because if you don't know how to spell that, I don't know what to tell you.
Oh, my gosh.
Bobby, how are you?
I'm good, man. This new week here is the start of a new month for me, and every month my work schedule changes. And as you know, like working in retail and stuff like that, like you don't really live like a conventional work lifestyle.
No, you're like my work husband, and I'm like already ready for a divorce. It's so hard.
Exactly.
Except for the month of March.
Except for March. I got a killer work schedule this month. It like almost perfectly aligns with like what everybody else kind of works, minus having to work a Saturday, but it's fine. I make money on Saturdays, so like it's not that big of a deal. But I am just honestly, it's just like the little things in life like that just pump me up. Like I have a somewhat normal work schedule this month, and I'm just living in the moment for that. That's fucking great. So how about you? What's going on?
I'm great, just another day. I finished painting
in the dysfunctional life of Caitlin.
I finished painting that bar card. I put a little highlight on Instagram, so I hope you guys are all proud of me for that. And don't ever expect me to do anything like that again because it was torturous.
Fair enough.
However, I learned that I can't just like throw the top coat on top of it. I have to wait 30 days for it to like settle and then put a top coat on it. So
fuck it, whatever.
Stay tuned in a month for the update. But no, I actually do have a funny story that happened. Bobby and I get together every Tuesday to kind of discuss like business of the podcast.
It's a game plan.
Yeah, so we strategize and whatnot. So I decided to cook him dinner as a thank you for picking me up from the airport about a month ago, even though I didn't pick him up. But so he was on his way over. My dad was actually at my apartment helping hang a bunch of things in the walls. I have like super strange apartment walls. Some of them have studs. Some of them are plaster. Some of them are, I don't know enough about walls to say. But basically my dad's like, don't hang anything up because you're probably going to tear down the entire wall. Just let me do it for you. So I'm like, cool, whatever. So he's hanging this stuff up on the wall that meets my next door neighbor's wall, and our walls are paper thin. Like I had never met this man before, but I had heard his voice so much I felt like I knew him. However, my father was using this super powerful drill. He's like, maybe you should just go knock on the door and let him know like that we're not coming through the wall. I'm like, okay. So knock, 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 meet my neighbor. It's this like super sweet, kind of like hippie-ish, I would say mid-60s dude. Not what I pictured, but I was pleased. And of course, like my dad pops his head out and he's chatting with him, and they're just like going back and forth. I think he was a little bit unclear of who lived there at that point, but I tried to drive it home that it was me, but apparently not in time. So I don't even think I told you this story, Bobby.
I don't know. No, this is new.
The neighbor, let's call him, I forget. I think it's Scott.
We'll just call him Fred.
Fred. Okay. So Fred says to me, he's like, yeah, I haven't really heard much noise from you at all yet. And like, that's great because I have been known to throw the occasional 5 a.m. rager here and there.
I've been there.
I don't have an off switch. It's a problem, but I'm working on it. Anyway, I digress. So he's like, but the other night, like I think I heard you for the first time. And I'm like, oh, like, okay. Like, he's like, were you moving? He looks at my dad. He goes, were you moving something? And he's like, I don't live here, buddy. Like, and I'm like, oh God, I had a bad feeling. I'm like, okay.
What is this man about to say?
And then he's like, well, it sounded like there was like, I heard a bunch of like pounding, and then then it sounded like there was someone in pain, like almost like they were crying. And I'm like, oh man, oh no. I'm like, well,
I stubbed my toe.
I'm like, I have a sound bar. My TV is pretty loud. Like I don't, and like meanwhile, like I had sex in the dining room that day, which I didn't have a carpet yet. Like it's very echoey in there. I'll put it that way. And like we had been out drinking, and like me and the man I'm seeing, and it's whatever. So I'm like, this guy, and I'm like trying to like like pivot. And he just keeps saying back and forth. He's like, yeah, it was like almost like it sounded like you guys were moving something across the floor. And then like I thought that there was like crying, and I'm like, oh my God, my face turned stop sign red. My dad just like has this look of disgust on me, on his face looking at me. I'm like, here I am, 29 years old. I don't live at home anymore, and I'm still getting cock blocked in front of my father. Like, cool.
Oh
just
my God.
really, really bringing that shame back home. Like, Dad, in case you were proud of me,
here's another time that
here's
you're
a
not.
reminder that I'm a heathen. So
Great vocab word too,
yeah.
by the way. Love it.
So yeah, that happened. But me and Fred are thick as thieves now.
Oh my gosh.
He actually, I think I mentioned this prior. I have a welcome mat outside of my door that says, hope you brought White Claws.
The White Claw thing.
Because I love White Claws. And I found out he's the one who dropped off the White Claws to me on Christmas.
Let's go, Fred.
Love Fred. Big fan.
Fred. Shout out to Fred. On that note, let's shout out to our guest today.
Yes.
Do you want to dive into that a little bit, Caitlin? Even though you went on just a monologue right there, I feel like it's proper for you to introduce her.
Sure. Joining us today is someone very special to me who has been through something very traumatic that Bobby and I fortunately can't really relate to. But I think a lot of our listeners can, which is, it's sad. It's tough.
It's going to be a tough one.
So today we're talking about grief, especially, more specifically grief of someone very close to you. And unfortunately, this person's experience was acting as the primary caregiver for the person that they lost. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my very best friend in the entire world who has tried to escape me for years. I think we're at about 15 years and counting. She's tried to ditch my ass, and it will never happen. I told her I will fucking find you. And here she is, ladies and gentlemen, Nicole.
Hey guys, how are you?
Nicole, it's been probably, let's see here. I graduated 2009. So it's been probably 12 years since I've seen you.
Sounds about right.
It's crazy. And then I've actually known you since you were probably about 12 because you dated the quarterback on my football team.
Whoa.
Yeah. I mean, my little league, like Pop Warner or whatever. But yeah.
Blast from the past. I
Blast
love
that. But that was, that's, I was like, it was funny because my mom was like, do I know Nicole? I was like, do you remember? Oh, I probably shouldn't say his last name. Whatever. I'll edit that out. But I was like, do you remember Todd? And she was just like, yeah. And I was just like, yeah. And she's like, oh, I think I remember and whatnot. So, yeah. But how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
You have a baby growing inside of you right now. So we commend you for coming on here with that.
I do. There's nothing else to say, but yes, I have a baby growing.
Nicole is beginning her quarantine tomorrow because she's due pretty much any minute. So naturally, like, if you know me at all, I'm a very last minute person, and I'm like, we should get in the podcast. And then she's like, I'm quarantining for a month. I'm like, how about the day before you quarantine?
How about this?
Sure, you don't have anything to get done before you stop leaving your house for a month. Like,
yeah, it's gonna be great.
Do you have time? So, but ironically, the timing works out pretty well because it falls really close to the anniversary of your father passing away, which will fall on March 7th.
Correct. Yep.
Yes.
So before we get into that, tell us about yourself a little bit.
Like Bobby said, I have a baby growing inside of me. I have another baby at home who just turned 2, and I am married to probably one of the coolest guys I've ever met.
I can confirm.
Can confirm. I haven't met him, so I can't confirm.
You
but
will.
yeah,
He's great.
I've heard good things from Caitlin, so that's what I like to hear. So how'd you two meet?
We met, I was working at Stadium, now Rockin' Rebel, and he's a dart junkie, shooting darts,
There you go.
Just kind of clicked.
That's literally what I did last night. I played darts all night.
So if you play darts, you might meet a wife. That's what I'm hearing.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I played darts with 5 other dudes, so I'm not
Maybe
sure.
you'll meet a husband. We're here for it. It's 2021, baby. Let's go.
This is true.
I have to add to that. I was Nicole's maid of honor in her wedding, and giving her speech was the funniest thing ever because I'm like, Nicole and I are very opposite. You'll see that throughout the episode. We've been best friends since we were 12 or 13 years old. So when Nicole met her husband, she was like, I used to call her the ice queen. Like, a man would walk up to her at a bar and be like, you're so beautiful, can I buy you a drink? She'd be like, no thank you, what do you think, I'm poor, I can buy my own drink, like, get the fuck out of here. Like, and like, I'd be like, dude, just like, first of all, take the drink, I'll drink it if you don't want it, but also like, Nicole, like, you put yourself out there, like, go on dates. She's like,
nah, I'm good,
better not. So then we finally get her like set up with someone on a date, and I'm so excited for her. And then she like calls me. She's like, I think I'm gonna cancel the date. I'm like, of course you are. Like,
I'm taking a
why
page out
wouldn't
of your
you?
book.
And then she's like, no, it's because I met someone. I'm like, bitch, you're lying. Like, just tell me the truth. Like, you're just canceling the date. But no, she did, and it was Todd. And now they're married and have one beautiful daughter and another one on the way, which is very exciting. I'm sure you're
Except
ready.
not a daughter, a son.
Yes, a son on the way. Sorry, Steve. So yes. So, okay. So Nicole's story is it's tough to listen to. So we will add a trigger warning about that. It is, it's hard, but I really recommend, taking some time and listening.
So where did this all start? So it was about this is going to be about the passing of your father. So what was step one? Like, what was the first thing that happened where you were like, oh shit, time to step up and time essentially to grow up at that point? You know what I mean? You're like, you were 26 when he passed.
Yep.
Okay. Did he suffer and fight for a couple years before that? So, or.
Yeah. So he was diagnosed with small cell lung cancer. I want to say it was 2016.
Yeah, in the summertime, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was working as an assistant property manager. He found out he was diagnosed, and I was like, well, you live in Jersey. He was living in Summers Point at the time. I'm like, we have an extra room. You're getting your treatments, like, closer to where we live. Like, why don't you just come move in with us? I took FMLA.
Which, for those who don't know, is Family Medical Leave Assistance,
I think,
or something like that. Basically, it means that you get paid, right?
No.
Oh.
It just means your job's, like, held.
Secured, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you won't lose your job for taking time off, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was 12 weeks. I took him to, it was chemo treatments. He also was doing proton therapy. I did that up until he was diagnosed in August. We did that until December. And then, it started there. He had small cell lung cancer. And then I think it was the following year was when we found out it traveled to his brain.
Okay. So you were probably you were 25 or something like that. What was that? 25?
And I think it's important to mention, too, that your parents had just divorced 2 years prior to that. So this was kind of like you were handling a lot of this on your own.
Yeah, my mom and my dad were friends. Like, she helped out as much as she could. She took him to a few treatments for me. He had a few brothers and sisters that took him as well. My brother's up in New York, so he did the best he could too. But for the most part, it was me and my husband.
Mm. So when you got this news, like, what was the first thought that came across your mind? You know what I mean? Like, were you?
Like, you always hear about people and, like, firsthand, like, when you're diagnosed, like, with cancer, or, like, my father was diagnosed with cancer, you never think it's going to be you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
And so, like, I remember where I was when he called me to tell me he was diagnosed with cancer. Like, I remember what we did after. Like, Todd and I went out to lunch because I was so upset. Like, you just never think it's going to be you. But then as he's getting treatments, I'm like, this is a walk in the park. He's going to be fine. Like, there's no way this is going to take him from us. Like,
and he responded to it very similarly to how you did, Bobby. He was super positive. Like, do you want to speak a little bit to that?
Oh my God, his positivity was, like, insane. Like, he would say his chemo treatments and proton therapy treatments were a way for him to make memories. Like, he was like, like, we're gonna get Jimmy John's, like, after, I get my 6 hours of chemo, and then, we can stop here on the way. Let's go to a baseball game. Him and my husband went to a Sixers game after one of his treatments. Like, he was all about making memories during those times, and I mean, he did. He was so positive, and it made us positive.
Yeah, I always say too, that's like 50% of the battle. You know what I mean? The second that you start thinking that, I had mentioned this in my episode. I think it's 3 or 2 or 3.
And for anyone who's a new listener, Bobby has had cancer and come out on the other side of it, so he really has some serious experience with this.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding everyone. But yeah, so I always used to say, like I said in episode, I think it's 2 or 3, I can't remember, but when I talk about my story with other people, is, like, your mental state and, like, the way you look at the situation is 50% of the battle. The second that you start saying, like, like, woe is me, or, like, or why me, or this, that, and the other thing, like, that's when it's going to just take over and it's going to run with it. And if, like, you keep that mental state just level, and you're just like stay focused on what you see. That there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You know what I mean? There is a light, and you just got to keep working towards it. Unfortunately, not everybody makes it, and it sucks. You know what I mean? Because it happens all too often, and there's nothing really you can do about it. But I commend your father for having a very similar mental state, especially because I didn't know him. I didn't know your dad, and that's pretty cool that someone else who went through something similar had the same mindset as me, because I like to spread that too. I have another friend who is still going through it right now, and my whole thing, I've never had a bad day in my life. I told him that, and he runs with that yesterday. Oddly enough, he texted me last night and said, just got all of my scans back, and there are no more tumors. So shout out.
That's so awesome.
Yes. So it's actually, I just got chills because I totally forgot that he texted me that last night. But so what was, like I said, so we have step one, like step two, like what did you know you had to step up to the plate and like, I'm going to have to do this? Or were you kind of like, hey, let me know if you need help and then I'll be there? Or were you like, no, like I'm going to start doing this?
I was basically like, I'm going to start doing this. He very much did not want me to be the person taking care of him. My biggest thing was, you took care of me my whole life. It's my turn now. Like, we're going to do this. You're going to move in with me and Todd. And we're going to get through this together. You're not going to go back to your house in Summers Point, New Jersey by yourself after your treatments.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Like you're going to, like, we're going to take care of you. We're going to be a team. And that's what he wanted to do. Like he knew he would need a support system. So he finally stopped fighting me.
And this was really new into your relationship too. You and Todd had just been living together for less than a year at that point, right?
I think it just hit a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, could you imagine like, you're trying to do all that like young newlywed stuff.
They weren't even married. They weren't even engaged yet.
But I mean, like, like the honeymoon stage,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we just moved in, like, let's decorate and all that shit. I mean, not that I give a fuck about any of that stuff, but like, you do all that stuff and then it's like, oh, by the way, my dad's moving in. Oh, and by the way, we have to take care of him.
So what was that like for your husband?
Like, when I introduced myself and said I married like the coolest guy ever, it wasn't even a thought. It wasn't even a fight. He was like, of course he's moving in with us. Like,
why would you even ask me that?
Like, he was like, absolutely. What do we need to do? Like, do we need to bring furniture in? Like, he very much, like, incredible. Like, I can't even say enough, like, nice words about it.
So he was in remission then for a while, correct? Or what was that period like?
So he stopped his final treatments in December, and then almost a year went by, and he still lived with us. I think he lived with us for the majority of it, on and off. He ended up getting an apartment in North Wales, and yeah, so he was in good spirits. I think it hit the summer when he was in remission was when he was like, I don't know, I'm getting a little foggy. I can't remember things. And I'm like, go to your doctor, like talk to them about it. Like, maybe they need to do another scan. He had just had a PET scan done, but it came back clean. Instead, they sent him to a psychologist and said he needed to talk to someone, and he was just depressed.
Now, that actually brings me back. Let's backtrack a little. How did he find out he had it? Like, what was his, like, I had a mass in my groin. So, like, it's pretty obvious it was bulging out of my hip. You know what I mean? So, what was his telltale sign to go get checked out? Because, like, lung cancer, it's not like you just, like, look down and you're like, oh, there it is. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So he had, like, a few medical issues. Like, he was diagnosed with diverticulitis, which I am not a doctor nor a nurse, and I don't know much, but I think it's too much. Your body's taking in too much sodium.
Diverticulitis, I know you have like bowel issues, so you have to use the bathroom a lot.
All I know is he had to watch his water intake, which I had never heard before in my life until that moment. I was like, what?
Yeah, what? Isn't water good?
Very confused. And then he ended up going to the ER at Abington because he started having ear and nosebleeds. When he went there, they like diagnosed him with something called SUNA, which is like a rare headache disorder, but he still wasn't feeling right. Like, he really had to advocate for his own health at this point because, like, his primary doctor and every other doctor, they were like, oh, like, it could be this, it could be that. Nothing ever, like, no one ever took, like, blood work or anything like that to be like, or, chest scans. He smoked for many years. At that point, he hadn't smoked for 11 years, but you'd think that would be a red flag to get a chest scan. So he was in remission, like I was saying, and then around Thanksgiving, you know, he was acting a little weird. Definitely like not talking like himself. It was almost like he knew something like was not right. He kept saying to my mom, like, I just need to make it to March. I just need to make it to March. And we'll get to what was happening in March later. But it was like 2 days after Thanksgiving where I was at work and my husband walked in the door, and at my work, my office had glass windows. And I saw him and I like looked at him, and he didn't even have to say anything. Like, I knew something was wrong. Like, I was working in Malvern. He was working in Conshohocken, I think, at the time. And I'm like, what are you doing? What's wrong? And he was like, you just have to call your mom right now. And I was like, no, what is wrong? And he's like, I cannot tell you. I'm here to support you. You need to call your mom.
Oh, he's the best, by the way. I just need to add that in there. He's great. You'll love him. We got to introduce you guys. He's great.
Yeah.
So I call my mom, and I'm like, what the fuck's going on? And she's like, so your dad had a couple of scans, and they found 2 tumors on his brain. And
So the cancer traveled to his brain.
Which is common with small cell. So that's why and I think I even forgot to mention this, he had preventative brain radiation after he had his chemo and proton therapy. So my mom said that. I like dropped my phone, like, you know how like in the movies where like people are like super dramatic when they get a bad news and they like drop their knees to the floor.
Like collapse, yeah.
Literally what happened to me. Like, I couldn't even stand up at that point. And then my boss literally packed up my stuff as I was on the floor. She didn't even know what happened. She just handed it to my husband and was like, tell her to call me later. Like, she needs to go home. So, yeah. We found out that he had brain surgery 2 days later.
What did that, to try and remove the tumors? Is that
yeah.
Okay.
So he had 2 tumors. They were bilateral, so they were literally on like the same part of the brain on both sides.
Okay.
And then that was a doozy. I don't know if you've ever been around anyone who had a brain.
Actually, we have someone in mind to come on the show and speak. He's had 4 brain surgeries. Yeah.
I'm curious to see if his reaction to the surgery was the same as my dad's. My dad had to be restrained for almost a week. Like,
anyone who knows him, that's not him.
like
he's got anger in him if you piss him off, but like he's a happy-go-lucky guy.
He got out of his surgery, and it was a very long day. But I was like, I'm going to go and see him just to make sure he's okay. Everyone in my family's like, he's not even going to be awake. Like, don't even bother. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go and see him. I wish I did not. He was being restrained, screaming at the top of his lungs. Like, he turned into the Hulk. He literally got out of his restraints. They had to use the firefighter restraints on him.
Because he's tall. He's a big, strong dude.
He's a very, very big man. And I'm like, what in God's name is going on? So it was like that for about a week with him. And then
what was he like freaking out about?
So we found out it was actually the medication that he was being given. He was being given Ativan, but that had like a reverse effect on him.
I took Ativan.
So It made him psycho. Like, it made him like
it made me go to sleep.
I mean, sorry, Dad. He is going to kill me or curse me down from the heavens when I say some of these stories. But like, I mean, so he was restrained, so he couldn't go to the bathroom by himself. The nurse like went to be like, okay, it's time to empty your bladder. And she goes to hand him the thing to empty his bladder. And he was like, this is considered rape in some countries. There's a lot of that going around. And I'm like, Dad, like, you can't say shit like that. And he's like, well, I don't know what she's going to grab for. And I'm like,
it's really funny, actually.
God.
That's so funny, like, because when I went through my stuff, I had to pee. Like, when I went paralyzed after that, I had to pee. And my mom being, and I'm like, I couldn't move. So like my mom being my mom, she's Italian and she's like, I want to help everybody. You know what I mean? And I was wearing shorts at the time. My mom like goes over and like they hand me a pail to take a piss in. And she goes, and she's like, and she like looks at my ex-girlfriend, now ex-girlfriend, girlfriend at the time. She goes, all right, you're up. She goes, you're up. And then she's like, okay. And she's like, yeah, you've probably been up there before. So it's like that. And like, she pulled it out and held it for me.
So now that we're looking back at this, it's funny, but what was that like for you at the time? Seeing?
Probably scary. Oh my gosh.
The first few days, like I was not well. Like I didn't sleep. We got a phone call the one time, which now is hilarious, but they were like, your dad's okay, but he tricked the nurse to let him go to the bathroom himself, and he tried to escape the ICU floor. And I'm like, what? I'm like, wait, how did he trick a nurse? Like, he's in like restraints. Like, he's like, yeah, I guess he was being very charming. I don't know what to tell.
My man.
Well, he has a background in sales, right? So,
yeah.
And he was very good at it. Very good at his job.
My man. Good for, I'm proud of him for that one. That is awesome.
You would have loved him. He was awesome.
Oh my God. Yeah. So I like get that phone call at like 2:00 in the morning. So I don't sleep for 2 days. I'm like, Jesus Christ, I'm going to find out that like he's like in the middle of the city somewhere, like whatever. But yeah,
so he was released from the hospital at that point.
Yep.
Did he ever regain, was he like not lucid at this point, or was he kind of lucid? Like, where was his headspace at?
He was actually doing pretty good. It was like so good, the fact that he like called me and my mom the day that he was being discharged, and he's like, yeah, I'm leaving. And we're like, no. Like, there's no, we saw you 2 days ago. Like, we saw how you were. And he's like, no, like, I'm really being discharged, guys. I'm like, put your nurse on the phone now. Talk to her. And she's like, yeah, he's great. Like, his spirits are up. So me and my mom picked him up. We took him for pizza and brought him back to my house. And he, again, with the positivity, like, he was having a nurse come, physical therapist, occupational therapist come, and like he was so into, he's like, want to do like my workouts with me, like I have to do this and that and try to regain my strength. So I worked out with him, like helping him with his physical therapy and everything else that he needed to be done. And that was in December. And then January comes and he's starting to act a little weird, like, and by a little I mean a lot, like saying things that like are not like him, getting really agitated and angry easily. And so they found out that they got the tumors, but they still left cancer cells in the margin of his brain. So he needed to do additional treatment. So we had to take him for an MRI just to make sure like it didn't spread anymore. And then that day, my husband went with me. We took him for an MRI. Found out the MRI was canceled because insurance wasn't covering it.
Which is a whole other topic.
Oh my God. Oh my God. My fucking, like, I can just feel the blood boiling. I fucking, don't even get me started on health insurance.
Yep.
For those fucking snakes. All of them.
I sat there and she said that and I'm like,
excuse me?
What? She's like, we called your phone. And this was like a big, like, ding, 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 something's not right. And he was like, you did call my phone, but my wife took care of this. And I think I mentioned before, my parents were divorced. So I'm like texting my mom and I'm like, did you call the insurance company for dad? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I don't know. It's him. Like, I don't know what he's talking about.
Did you kind of know at that point that something was
Yeah. So he had, there was a nurse that worked with his doctor very closely. So I ended up calling her and being like, something's not right. And she's like, go across the street and go into the emergency room. This doesn't sound good to me at all. And I was like, okay. So I was like, you know what?
Did you call her personal line? Like, how did you?
I had her cell, like her work cell.
So again, I feel like advocating for yourself once again. And he couldn't even advocate for himself. So he had, that's so sad.
So I called her. She's like, go to the emergency room. Like, he will get all the tests that he needs. Like, so we go and I know he knows that something is wrong. Like, I can tell. He's sitting there. He's fidgeting. He's like, we get called back, like, I guess, like, in triage, where they, like, ask them all these questions, and then they're like, go back out and we'll call you when the doctor's ready. So I'm outside on the phone with my mom, and my dad storms out, and my husband's, like, following him, like, and I'm like, what's going on?
And her husband's not that tall, might I add too, so it's like trying to, like...
It's like David versus Goliath.
Literally, yes.
Literally, like, my dad was like 6'1", and my husband's 5'6". So I'm like watching this, and I'm like, what's going on? And Todd's like, he refuses to stay. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, Dad, he was like, I am not, people are coughing, people are sneezing, it is dirty in there.
This
like
is pre-corona.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Like, so I'm like, I'm like, Dad, we have to get this test done. He's like, nope, I'm not staying here. And I'm like, okay. So, like, we pack our bag, let's get into the car. I'm like, okay, like, let's just go home. I call the doctor, and he's like, no, like, something is not right. We need to get him looked at. So I call my mom. She tries to talk to him. He's, like, being a pain in the ass. So I call my uncle, and I'm like, we need your help. He won't listen to me. He won't listen to my mom. He's like, I'll be right over. Comes over with pizza, and he's like, Chuck, like, we got to take you to the doctor. Something's wrong. My dad starts laughing out of nowhere. Like it was, like, creepy. And we're like, what are you laughing at? He's like, see these fucking kids running around here? We're like, what? There are no kids here. What are you talking about? He's like, that fucking kid from next door ran right upstairs. And we're like, no. Like, what are you talking about?
So he's just straight up seeing things now.
Yeah, he's, like, basically, like, hallucinating. Like, we're like, no, that's not right. And my uncle's like, we need to get him somewhere, like, now. So I call the hospital he's been getting his treatments at. They take us right away. We go into the emergency room. We walk in, and they take us back. We're in the emergency room, and, you know, he's getting all these tests done. He comes back. He's like, ready to go home now. What? I don't understand why I had to come down here at 12:30 at night. And we're like, oh, you know, like, just like your appointments, like, relax. And then I always compare it to this. And Bobby, I don't know if you're a Grey's fan. But
Grey's Anatomy, by the way. Always plugged.
But I know Katie is. And there's an episode where all the interns are being trained on how to give people, like, bad news. And Meredith, like, hears how it's being done. And, like, she gets pissed off. She's like, you're not just giving them bad news. Like, you're giving them news that's, like, earth-shattering. They will remember your face for the rest of their life. And it's so true. Never met this doctor before. Never saw her again. She came in after all the tests and looked at us and said, the cancer's all over his brain. It's terminal. And I will never forget her face, what she looked like when she told us that. It's like, it's probably the second worst thing I heard throughout my dad's, like, whole journey with cancer. And it was definitely hard to, I don't even know the words, like, hard to even understand, because, like I said before, when you don't think you'll ever experience, like, cancer yourself or someone close to you, like, and you certainly don't think you're ever going to lose them to it. Like, that's just, like, not in the cards. Like, but at that point, I was losing my dad.
Okay, so this was January. Do you kind of want to get into what was happening for you in March?
Yeah. I was supposed to marry my now husband on March 17th. Because of everything going on, and my dad stayed in the hospital a few days. He was getting some, like, radiation done until the doctors were figuring out, like, what to do with him at that point.
So is that the radiation just kind of to buy him some more time at that point?
Yeah.
Okay.
So during one of his treatments, I was talking to his doctor, and I was like, how much time does he have? Because we know it's terminal, so we know it's not long. He's kind of like, I can't give you a timeline. And I'm like, well, here's the thing. I'm getting married on March 17th, so I need to know if my father is going to be there. Like, and he was like, you might want to move up your wedding.
And that's frustrating, like that he didn't just tell you that off the bat.
Yeah, like kind of pissed me off at first because I'm kind of like, well, I initially asked you. Like, you could have, like, just said, like, not much time or something.
Like less than 3 months, yeah.
That's such a hard thing to tackle, though. Like, you have it's easy to be, like, upset with the doctor, like, when you're in these shoes, you know, because that's the easy route. The hard route is, like, imagine that guy, he has to say that every day. You know what I mean? And every single person is going to react differently. You wanted the cold hard facts because you're like, I'm getting fucking married. I need to know this, blah, blah, blah. Then he's like, okay. And if he gave you the cold hard facts, you'd be like, cool, I like you, Mr. Doctor. But then he's like, oh, man, that worked out really great. And then you go to the next person who you have to tell the earth-shattering news to. He's like, I'm going to give him the cold hard facts. And they're like, your dad's going to die in a week. And they're like, what the fuck? Why would you tell me that? You know what I mean? You're like, so it's like how, and yes, they always say, know your audience, read the room and whatnot. That's got to be in the doctor's defense. Like, that's got to be something hard to navigate because what do you do? What do you do? You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And either way, it's not like there's nothing he's going to say that's going to make you feel better. Whether he gives you the news harsh, straightforward, beats around the bush, doesn't matter. It's not going to make you feel better. It's not going to change the outcome, unfortunately. What do you do, man? That's tough. That's a tough position. But then, obviously, on the receiving end, you don't give a fuck. You're like, just give me the goddamn news. You know what I mean?
But I mean, all in all, like, I'm glad he, like, ended up being like, you know, you might want to move things up if you can. So we did. Like Katie mentioned before, she was the maid of honor at my wedding. I had a lot of great bridesmaids. My husband had a great group of groomsmen. Everyone came together and we ended up getting married on February 3rd in our living room, actually.
Okay, so did you wind up having 2 weddings? Like, did you, or like 2 receptions? Like, how did that work out?
So we did the ceremony at my house and had a little reception. Like, it was just wedding party and our families. And then on March 17th, we had the big reception. Okay. But,
well, before we get into that, because that is a whole other story and stuff, I'll say this.
By the way, I'm new to all this, so as I'm asking her these questions, I don't know anything. I know that she took care of her dad, and that's
how we like it. As you guys know, we like to. And I'm here like a little bit of a spoiler alert, but it also, I'll say this, as the wedding party, like the things that you think you're gonna be planning for. I mean, this is my best friend since I was 13. Like, I wanted this to be so perfect for her. I was in the middle of planning her bachelorette party, and we were going to go down the city and do brunch and bowling and like all these fun things. And it turned so quickly from like, okay.
Can I just say something real quick? I feel like you would be the best maid of honor.
This
Caitlin,
was
because,
my
like,
trial run. I wish I could do it again because I'd be so much fucking better at it.
Yeah, like.
So when the vow renewal comes, come find me because we are going to go in.
Because you're just like kind of like you're fun, bubbly, and like dorky, and you would go bowling, but somehow make it fun. You know what I mean?
I think I will say this as. The whole thing switched. It was like, instead of planning a fun weekend for you, it was, okay, how are we going to have a ceremony in your living room? What's that going to look like? How do we come up with 50 folding chairs? How do we come up with a bouquet for you that's not crazy expensive because you're going to need another one in a couple of weeks, but we want something nice. How do we
ease the pain of you? You know what I mean? Like for Nicole herself.
It was so many moving pieces that you just don't think about, but it was like, and she couldn't really like, because in the middle of this, she's taking care of her dad, which we'll talk about. So it was like, we're just like, let's get a wedding together in 2 weeks. Like, let's just make it happen. And I will say, it's one thing that you don't talk about a lot, but it really did change your wedding for you quite a bit. You didn't really get to do all the things that most brides get to do. So I will say, I'm sorry that happened. That sucks.
No, and like you saying that, like, even now, we just celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary. I had to think about that. And I'm still a little resentful. You know, you talk about like the stages of grief and stuff, and like I am a firm believer, like, you're not like sad, then angry, and then you come to terms. Like, grief is a process you go through forever, and like, this is my time where I get the angry stage every year. I get pissed off. I don't want to talk to anyone. I'm not really up for celebrating, like, but I have to because it's the day me and my husband got married. But I look at it as the day we got married because my dad was dying. Like, it and that's depressing. Like, there's no way to like sugarcoat it. Like, you know, like, we had the ceremony. It was beautiful. Don't get me wrong. It was hands down the most beautiful day ever. But then we woke up the next morning And my dad didn't remember it.
So he was living with you at this time,
Mhm.
and it got, from what I remember, it took a turn pretty quickly, right? He was, after that day that you got the news, he kind of lost lucidity and never really fully came back.
Yeah, if you've ever seen the movie 50 First Dates, that's what I was living until he passed. You know, we wake up in the morning and he would be like, why am I here? And I'm like, oh, like, don't you remember you're having work done in your house? Like, lying to him. He's like, well, where's my dog? And I'm like, Mom has Lulu. Well, where are my car keys? And I'm like, they're downstairs. He's like, my wallet? And I'm like, I think Mom has it. And he'd like joke like, yeah, she definitely wants my wallet. Like, like it was like that every single day. And then I'd give him his medicine and he's like, what's this pill for? What's this pill for? This pill for? And I'm like telling him what every single pill is for.
Would you tell him the truth?
We never told him he was dying.
And his memory was very, it was in short spurts too. Like he would have like 10 seconds of this and then he would switch to 10 seconds of this.
Isn't it like same thing? 50 First Dates, 10-second Tom.
Yeah,
remember?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was actually just like that.
It was, and like sometimes it like got even like he'd go back like 25 years. Like I'd wake him up in the morning and he'd be like, can you let me sleep 5 more minutes? I had a crazy night. And I'm like, well, what'd you do? And he's like, I went down to the club. Me and so-and-so were there. I didn't walk in the door until 3:30 in the morning. And I'm like, ooh, crazy.
Crazy. And you're like, Dad, you're on the couch watching TV with me the whole night.
I'm like, partying hard, I see. And he's like, yeah, like, even like making jokes like, you know, I had some Coke, not the drinking kind either. And I'm like, oh, not the things you want to hear come out of your father's mouth.
He's like one of those guys where he like partied. He was, and then he had kids and he was like the Iron Fist. Like you would have never known. Like we never knew anything. We thought her dad was like picture perfect picket white fence.
Dude,
man.
there was a reason why he was so strict with me, because he never wanted me to be like
what he was. You could just say it.
The stories, like after he was diagnosed, he's like, I'll tell you some things. And like even now, I'm like, I cannot believe he went to LaSalle High School, and at the time they wore corduroy pants. He lit a kid's pants on fire. Like,
so he was talking about a lot of things that were past, and,
yes.
and so he didn't really have a grasp on like what time period it was, really.
Yeah, like we went back and forth. Like I'd be like, do you know who the president is? And he would just be like, I don't even care right now. Like, which is not
preach.
That's not like him at all.
Yeah, not absolutely not.
So those are some of the funnier things. Do you want to get into some of the hard parts of it? And at this point, you were his primary caregiver. Did he have a nurse that was visiting? Like, what was that like?
They came every other day. It wasn't like one solid nurse. It would be a bunch of different nurses that would come. They just check his vitals and stuff.
But you were administering his were you giving him IVs, or like what was that like?
So they were changing, and I forget the word of it. Maybe
it's like a port, I think.
No, he just had an IV in his arm, so they were changing the dressing on it for me. And well, we had to stop giving him fluids. We only gave him the fluids to get him to the wedding, actually, like to get him to February 3rd. And then we stopped. And then, like, yeah, there were times like where he would try ripping out his IV and like blood would be everywhere. And like I said before, I'm not a nurse. I'm not like, I know nothing. So I was learning along the way. And it just got crazy, you know. The weaker he got, the harder it was. Him having, like, I didn't sleep at all in case he had to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. And so I'd sit outside the bathroom. I didn't want to disturb him. But then, you know, there were a few times where I could hear him, like, fall. So I'd have to help my dad onto the bathroom. Those are things, like, you never imagine you're going to do. Like, I remember joking with him, like, as a teenager, like, you better be nice to me. I'm the one that picks your nursing home and who wipes your ass. And he's like, well, if anyone has to wipe my ass, like, kill me, because I don't want that.
And little did you know it was going to be you.
Like, literally. And, like, you know, like, you look back on those times and you're like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, I can't believe I went through that.
And when she said she wasn't sleeping, like, you set up a cot in your living room, so that, and you had like the camera that people use for babies and dogs, and you had that in his room so you could keep an eye on him.
And I'd get like a notification when there was movement and stuff. Like I turned into.
Now,
like,
was he like physically well? Like, could he could get up and walk around and stuff? I mean, for the most part, because there's like, I always say that there's like two different types of like, there's of someone dying where like your brain and everything inside you starts to go away, and but your exoskeleton is you're there, you're good to go. Like my grandmother was like that. She suffered from dementia. Her brain was like a plate of mashed potatoes. It just was non-existent. But physically, for a much, I think she was 83 or whatever. I mean, she looked good for 83. Like she was healthy. My other grandfather, her husband, polar opposite. His body was failing around him. Mind sharp as a tack. He could tell you the who hit home runs in the Phillies game before, what the score was, what, all this stuff. His mind was there, firing on all cylinders, but everything else around him was just, whatever. So what was your father like? Was he one or the other, or?
He was kind of a mix. His body was very, very weak. The day after we got married was the Eagles Super Bowl. My dad, huge Philadelphia sports fan. Like, he ended up needing help. We had my brother and my husband having to help him down the steps to get him. So basically, he was secluded to his room the majority of the time, other than like when like his brothers or sisters or nieces or nephews came over, they'd help bring him down. But yeah, he was just weak. He like tripped a couple of times going to the bathroom, so that's when I started following him. Like, and again, he didn't really know what was going on, so I basically would he'd be like, "What are you doing out here? What's going on?" And I'm like, "Oh, Bernie's my dog. Like, Bernie's just making noise. Like, he has to go out. Like, I saw you were in the bathroom. I just wanted to say hi." Like, I'd have to like make up excuses for it because he's a very proud man, very hard patient. So I didn't want to do anything that was going to upset him.
And when you say you weren't sleeping, like, I am a firm, like, if I don't sleep more than 5 or maybe 6 hours, I am complete garbage. Like, I'm not joking, because I stayed at your house a couple times throughout this woman did not sleep. Like, if you got 2 hours of sleep in a day, like, that was generous. And this was like for at least, I would say, 6 weeks probably. So your brain was foggy. I remember talking to you and you were not yourself. Like, you were exhausted all the time. And like you were trying to be this caregiver on almost no sleep, and you couldn't even hold a conversation most of the times because your brain was just so tired. Not to mention you're dealing with all these really tough emotions and trying to be someone's like primary caregiver.
Mentally and physically
I've
exhausted.
Never seen a human being in my entire life operate like that for so long. The way that you did it was unbelievable.
It definitely was difficult, and I think what's most difficult about it, and like throughout my whole grieving journey, like, I didn't have time to process anything. I didn't have time to process like
it was go time. Like, it was this is happening, this is go time.
Yeah, like,
do something.
I have to do this. Not even that I have to. I want to do this. I always say I was privileged enough to spend those last few weeks with him. I had every meal with him. I got to, we watched that 70s show like on repeat. Like, I was the one doing that with him, and like, it's the most rewarding thing, but it made afterwards so much harder because everything hit like a ton of bricks. He ended up passing on March 7th. As I said before, my wedding was supposed to be March 17th. We still had a reception. I wanted nothing to do with that reception. We had a funeral and a wedding reception in the same week. It was like,
talk about fucking roller coaster. Yeah. Oh my god.
It was like actual like hell. I remember just like not wanting, like, I'm just like, do we even have to do this? Like, yeah, we do. The money's already in. Like, and my mom was like, your dad would be pissed off if you didn't. Like, he would be so disappointed if you didn't do it.
And it was like people were trying to support you at the wedding, like, you look beautiful, congratulations, also I'm so sorry about your dad. And you were like, I remember you like looking at you and you just had this like glaze in your eyes the whole day. And do you remember any of it?
I remember like bits and pieces. I remember someone drunk coming up to me being like, sorry to hear about your dad. And I was like,
fuck you.
thank you. Okay. But then you had the people that like literally tiptoed around you. And like,
It's like, which is better? You know
like,
what I mean?
yeah,
like, they're
like-
both terrible.
I
You
was a
don't-
tiptoer. I'll say that. I was like, "What do you need? Are you okay?" And you were like, "Just get the fuck out of it. Give me a drink." I was like, "I can do that. I'll be back." Okay, yeah.
but that wasn't even like it's like the people who like want to ask like, oh my God, how are you? Or how are you? And like, you know, the difference between the two. And like, you're just kind of like, how am I? I mean, I don't want to fucking be here, but here I am. Like,
Did you say that?
no. Oh God, no.
I would have.
I felt
Cheers.
like I'm somebody that feels like I have to be strong for everyone else. And it was very difficult. My dad was one of 7. 2 of his brothers and sisters had already passed away. So his 5 brothers and sisters were there. They were all dealing with it. My mom was dealing with it. My brother was dealing with it. Like, I felt like I had to be strong for everyone else. So,
And on a day that's supposed to be your day.
And
right?
I can say, having witnessed it, like that day, you did that for other people. You didn't do that for you.
yeah, like I always say that, and I say this to people all the time when they talk about like wedding planning and stuff. I'm like, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how big it is or how expensive it is. It doesn't matter if you do it in your backyard or you go down to the Ritz-Carlton down in Philadelphia. All that matters is the very few people that are there. Like, and that day meant nothing to me, the 17th, because my dad wasn't there. I didn't care how it went. I didn't care about the music that I spent days and days thinking about prior. I didn't care about the cake. I didn't care about the food. I didn't care who showed up and who didn't.
And this was not, I can say firsthand as her maid of honor, she had an itinerary plan to send to the wedding party for the day of the wedding, just to let us know what we were going to be doing that day. And she designed it on like really pretty paper. Like, she is a very detail oriented person. So for her to just be like, I didn't care about this, that's not who she is. But I think what you're trying to get at is perspective. And I think you and I have actually talked about this quite a bit during Corona, how a lot of people have had to change their plans. And do you have a message?
I was gonna say
for
it's almost
brides?
like you did like the COVID wedding thing before the COVID wedding thing. Like, I had to delay this stuff. I had to or push things forward. I had to make all these major adjustments because of this. And then now everyone in COVID is doing similar things. Obviously not as nearly impactful to the reason of why you had to do yours and why they have to do theirs. But like, that's I was thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah, like while it was happening, like I know, like honestly, like it sucks either way. Like, it sucks that you had to do it because of a pandemic. It sucks I had to do it because my dad was dying. But I hope those brides and grooms got perspective the same way I did, that it really doesn't matter if it's that big like wedding that you planned. Obviously, it stinks financially if you're not able to do it. But other than that, like, your family's there. Like, your mom, your dad, your brother, your best friends are there. Like, that's the party. Like, it does not matter whether or not you spend $150 on your wedding or $30,000 on your wedding.
Yeah, it's like that reception with your father there with the 20 people that were there was just 10,000 times more impactful than the wedding could have been without him. You know what I mean? It doesn't, it didn't make a difference at all. That's important.
Absolutely. Like, I was able to dance with my dad. Again, it wasn't the same thing that I pictured or anything like that, but like, I still have those pictures. I still have those memories, and I'm lucky that I have them, because some people don't even get it that far. You know,
that's
what
something
I
I
mean?
want to talk about too. Is you lost your father pretty young. You were 26, and you've since had children, and you're a mom now, and you're a wife. Talk me through that. What is that like? Or I guess maybe even the grieving process for you. Like, you lost your dad. Like, then what happened?
Probably since I lost him, it hasn't really gotten easier. And you wake up every day like wondering when it's going to get easier. I lost my dad in March, and I found out I was pregnant with my daughter in May. Which is something that like you always want to experience, like, and tell your family. Like, you always think like, how am I going to tell my husband I'm pregnant? How am I going to tell my parents I'm pregnant? and I never got that moment with my dad. He very much wanted grandchildren, like made it super, super clear how badly he wanted them, how quick he wanted them. Like, he would have been the greatest pop in the world. So not having him and seeing his excitement really sucked for me.
So I am going to backtrack a little bit, and this is a personal experience for the two of us, but I think it's really important. Like I said earlier, I wish that I had known this prior. But as someone that was supporting you through this, once your dad passed, it was, like we said, like it was go time, and you were going through quite a bit trying to take care of your father. But once your dad passed, you and I both know, I kind of dropped off a little bit because I was like, oh man, that was, it was a lot. Like, he's passed, like it's time to start grieving. Like, I'm going to give her some space. And like that, as we've learned, wasn't necessarily the best move. And I've spoken to quite a few people who have been through loss, and they say like that period after the passing is sometimes the hardest. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, so definitely, once he passed, once the wedding reception was over, I didn't even mention this, I actually was laid off from my job as well because I didn't qualify for FMLA. So I kind of was just taking time off, and that's when people, they don't mean to, but they get back to their life. Their life is still going. My life was still at a halt. I was still trying to,
process.
Exactly. Like, process, like, what was going on. I was also diagnosed with PTSD after my dad died. So
Which makes plenty of sense because what you went through was very traumatic.
Like, from hearing, like, creaks upstairs to thinking he was getting up, I'd jump up and, like, run upstairs and, like, the bedroom's empty. He's not there anymore. To even just, like, sleeping at night, waking up, like, in, like, a sweat and being like, oh my God, I fell asleep. I've been asleep for how long? Like, no, you're allowed to sleep. My life stopped where everyone else carried on with their life. And, I'm not saying like that's not fair. Like, they shouldn't do that, but carry on with your life and like still like check in every once in a while. Still, like once a month, hey, you want to grab drinks? Like, do you want to get out of the house? And like, it could be anything from just a phone call. I found a lot of people who did do stuff for me ended up like getting very resentful if I didn't show my appreciation a certain way, which kind of like still to this day I'm kind of like, I'm still figuring it out. I was still figuring it out. I was obviously appreciative, but I was numb. I didn't know how to act or how not to act about like, like someone sending me flowers or something. I said thank you, but apparently it wasn't in the way that they wanted. You know what I mean? So,
and I can say firsthand, I was just like, I don't know what to do. Like, and I was trying so many different things as your best friend. Like, what will be the thing that will make her feel better? And I think realizing for me as your friend, like, nothing's going to make you feel better, right? Like, your dad died. Like, there's nothing I can do that's going to make that okay for you.
Unless you can bring him back.
Right. And I felt defeated. I remember one time I cooked you a bunch of food and I brought it over and Todd was like, today's not the day. I'm like, and I was like, I don't know what else to do. Like, I don't understand. And then, I mean, we have since talked about it quite a bit, but I think you had said the people that treated you like you were just a person, right, were the ones, and didn't be like, hey, how are you? Like, how are you dealing with your dad? And they're just like, hey, I saw this funny thing on the internet today. How are you? Like, those were kind of the people that you gravitated towards a little bit more, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. And even going back to his funeral, I've said to you, like, so many people showed up at the funeral, but you remember the ones that came in the line who you, one, didn't expect to come in line, and two, didn't talk to you like they were at your dad's funeral. Like, they were just like, hey, like, remember this time, this or that, instead of being like, I'm so sorry about your loss. Like, this is awful. Like, I fucking know it's awful. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You don't need to remind me. Yeah.
Like, thanks. Like, or like the ones that came in line and like told me stupid stories about my dad. Like, that's the stuff you want to hear.
Yeah, I remember. So my buddy who just recently passed away, we had like a celebration of life, and like we said, his brother spoke a couple words and whatnot, and then we were like, does anyone want to tell any stories? And then it was like 40 minutes of like remember when we did this stupid shit? You're like, oh my God, remember that one time? You're like, motherfuck, I can't believe I lived through all this crazy shit. But like, you could see everybody laughing, but crying at the same time because you're like, fuck, like this hurts so bad, but it also feels really good, at the same time. So like that's how I like to respond to it. And I've faced a lot of death in my, like with friends and family and all that stuff. So I think I think what you're saying is that's the best approach, where it's like, you don't need to remind me that this sucks. You don't need to tell me I'm sorry, or that you're sorry. Like, one, it's not your fault. Two, it's not anybody's fault. It happened. You don't need to tell me that. What would be cool is tell me a goofy story of my dad. Tell me a time that my dad, fucked up talking to some chick at the bar, or like, like something stupid, like whatever, it fell on his face, or tell about a time where my dad helped you. You know what I mean? Like, oh, dude, there was one time, I blew a tire out in my car. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. Your dad woke up and picked it up. It was a memory I'll never forget. Tell me that shit, because that validates me feeling like shit, but it also uplifts me a little bit.
Yeah, it doesn't make you feel like a victim in some way. Like, I remember just being like, I hate that people are feeling sorry for me. Like,
because your dad's proud, but you are definitely cut from your dad's cloth. Like, you guys are very similar. So I think being a victim for you is new, because that's not a role you've ever played in your life. Ever.
Yeah, and again, like, not saying like those kind words aren't appreciative. They totally are. And especially I know so many people are like, well, what do you say to them? Like, how do you act? Like, what do you do? Like they're still very appreciative, but like there comes to a point where you're kind of like done.
Especially when you're standing at a funeral line and it's, hundreds of people. I'm sorry. You're like, oh my God, I don't want to fucking hear this anymore.
I remember I put a Wawa bag behind you, and I remember I was like on, like, I called it Nicole Patrol. I'm like, you would just like give me a nod. I'd be like, this means she needs Red Bull. This means she wants a Sour Patch Kid. Like, and you would just be like, need something. No, need gum. And it was just like, you were like a robot. Like, you weren't like, it was very robotic for you, because like you said, it's a line. It's I'm sorry.
And you're like, all right, dude, I get it. Guess what? The person before you said that too. And then the person before that said it. And guess what? I bet you the person behind you is going to say the same fucking thing.
And I remember,
it's only something different.
I remember you saying, and I think this is a message I'd like to say on your behalf, is like, if you're one of those people that's wondering, like, should I go to a funeral? Because I think funerals, number one, if you don't want to go, don't go, because funerals are for the living, not the dead. We say this a lot. But if you feel like, I want to go to support this person, but a lot of times people look at death like an opportunity to like be sad about something, and people feel guilty for wanting to mourn someone, like, and they almost feel like, well, if I go to the funeral, are people going to be like, well, you didn't even know this person that well, like, why are you even there? I think, having seen the impact that it had on you, when members of your dad's softball team, when your dad was their softball coach, and when you guys were 12 and they haven't seen them since, like, you saying things like that, like seeing her show up was like, wow, like, my dad really did have an impact. So if you're wondering, should I go, should I not go, go, because it will make the family feel so good.
Always go. Seeing, like, as exhausting as that line is, like, seeing how loved he was the coolest thing ever. Because, one, if you know my dad, he was a royal pain in the ass to everyone. Love him to death, but gave everyone a hard time. Loved to fight. Like, he was just a pain in the ass. But, like, seeing all those people, like, love how much of a pain in the ass he was for just who he was genuinely was awesome.
I want to backtrack a little bit, and because I can relate to this a little bit. Do you think that your dad's positivity, like where he said he wanted to like create memories, this and the other thing, do you think that he knew that he was going to die?
Yeah.
Like at that moment before it even spread and all that stuff, like do you think he was like, I know that this is it? Because my grandmother, my mom's mom, was she survived breast cancer twice, if I'm not mistaken. She had a heart attack before and then ultimately wound up dying Christmas Eve in 2001, I believe it was. And we have talked about it. We've unpacked it sometimes with my mom, and there's like this kind of theory that we think that she knew that she would, like, when she passed, it was pretty quick and sudden, but we thought that she knew that something was really going on, but she never wanted, because stubborn Italian, didn't want to be a burden on her children, all that stuff. Do you think that there was anything like that where he was like, I know I'm really sick, but I can't let this happen to my children and my loved ones, so I'm just going to deal with it.
So I guess I never thought of it from like initially. I never even considered maybe, but my family and I have talked about that, like we weren't being told everything from him. Like now that we've done our research on small cell lung cancer, we know you're most likely going to pass within 5 years, whether or not it had spread or not. Like we did not know that. So, and we also don't know if he knew that, but he did a lot of research. So you bringing that up, probably. He 100% probably did.
And that's probably why he wanted to make those memories during chemo and stuff, you think?
Yeah, and he was like super involved in the wedding planning process. Like when I was finally engaged and we were going through that process, like food tasting and like cake tasting, like he wanted to know everything. Like he was so into it. I mean, I don't know many fathers that
give a shit about the flowers in the wedding.
Like,
they're just saying, they're like, how much are they, and do I have to pay for this? You know what I mean?
Like exactly. Like he was super, super into it. And like even after everything, like going to baseball games, like he was at my wedding shower the entire time. And then
True.
And then came out and partied with us afterwards, which like who wants to?
Yeah, or you could be like my dad, who made an Excel spreadsheet with a budget and said, I don't care what you do, stay in this budget. Go. And then was like, I don't give a shit.
I have to shout out your shower. It was showers suck, right? Like you don't know this, Bobby.
No, I don't.
For you. Nicole was very adamant, like, I want my shower to be a party. We're getting drunk. Like, so we had a beverage fountain that was like, you plugged it in and it was like almost like a chocolate fountain, but it poured beverages and it lit up. I had to like get like a generator to like power it. And it had, what did it have in it, Nicole?
Fireball, baby.
3 handles of Fireball in it. And at the shower, her grandmother, she took a glass and she's like, what's this? I'm like, Gram, that's cinnamon whiskey. She's like, all right, and just puts a glass right under it and has Fireball on ice. I'm like, damn, these Albors know how to party.
By the end, we were drinking out of it straight from the fountain.
Mm-hmm. Like our heads under it. It was great. I still have the fountain if we want to bring it out for anything.
Right,
but
my dad cut me off.
he did. It was
kind of rude.
He was like, he's like, Katie, don't give her any more margaritas. I'm like, sure, here you go. And like, I'm hammered. It was a great time. But.
He ended up standing by the beverage table, making sure no one was getting me a beverage at some point. Whatever. I was there to party.
Oh my God. And he was too, clearly.
So your dad passes, the hard part starts, and then you get pregnant. I think that I want to talk about a little bit today. And we've kind of gotten through it with the wedding. You were, I don't want to say fortunate in having your dad there, because although he was physically there, he wasn't necessarily fully mentally there, but kind of people who lose a parent before these big things in their life happen, like being pregnant and having your daughter. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, even though he wasn't mentally at my wedding, I still feel so much more blessed, because I know other people don't get that at all. But then comes to getting pregnant and having a baby. And that's by far, I think, the hardest thing of that process. I mean, my daughter turned 2 a couple of weeks ago, and like the day before her birthday, I was a mess. Like just like crying because my dad wouldn't be like at the birthday party the next day, and that he doesn't get to watch her grow up. I mean, whatever you believe in, like he may or he may not, but he's not physically there,
and you don't get to share it with him either.
Exactly. And like, you know, I've said this 100 times, he was a pain in the ass. He gave his opinions when they weren't wanted. I hate that I don't get to fight with him about parenting. Like, I hate it.
That's a really interesting. I never even thought about that.
Like, he would have been like, oh, you let her do that, you should not do that. And I would be like, well, she's my fucking kid, so I'm letting her do it. I hate that I don't even get to experience that, because it's something everyone experiences with their parents. I experience it with my mom, but
isn't it crazy how, like, you know, because I know my sister, who has a 4-year-old now and a 4-month or 5-month-year-old, 5-month-year-old, Jesus. But she, like, she argues with my parents all the time. You know what I mean? Like, she's always like, oh, no, I don't care. I'm doing this or whatever. And it's like they sit there and they think of it as like a negative. But then you're sitting here like, you should just own that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, own that because it could go away and you're going to miss those stupid arguments that were literally over nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still a moment. It was a memory. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the stupid stuff I fight with my husband about. And I'm like, you're going to miss me when I'm gone. Like, you may hate that now, but you're going to be like, damn, I wish she closed that toothpaste. I wish we could fight about her not closing that toothpaste.
Wait, you don't close the toothpaste? Usually guys don't do. Oh, Nicole.
Listen.
'Cause we all have our flaws and it's okay.
Listen, I don't even have time to brush my hair, Katie.
All right, yeah. Okay, good point. So, so do you have a message that you want to give to people who've lost someone close to them, or just anything that you want people to know about the process, whether it's those who have gone through it, those who haven't gone through it, those who are trying to support someone through it? Like, talk to us about that.
It's never ending. It's not something like you'll go through this, and then life will be great again. Like, you're going to be sad. You're going to be angry. You're going to, like, come to terms with things. And then you're going to be really angry again. Then you're going to be really sad again. It's not like it's not like it's something that, like, just stops. You never stop missing someone you care about. Like, it's always going to be there. Will it get easier? Sure. But will you still have those days? 100%. And I think that's important for everyone to know. Like, you're not weird for, like, I still, when I talk about my dad, drop him in the present tense. Like, my dad is, and I always, like, feel the need to correct myself, but he still is to me. Like, just because he's not here and it's who he was, he still is that person to me.
I think, like, what a good statement is I always used to say too, like, what do they say? It never gets easier, but you learn to live with it. That's two totally different things. That doesn't mean, like, you know, all of the friends and family and stuff that I've lost, it's never easier, like, talking about them. I tear up all the time talking about certain people and whatnot that I've lost. So it's not easier. I feel that same pain, but I just learned to live with it. You go from thinking about it every minute from after it happens to every hour, to then every couple hours, to every day, then a week, then before you know it, it's like, okay, a month will go by, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, I didn't think about that, you know. And then you don't forget, but you just learn to live.
And I think too, you never get over it, and that's one thing you and I have talked about a lot, is like just not trying to get over it, to just move forward and move forward with it, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, and as weird as it sounds, I don't think I'd be the mom that I am today had I not gone through the stuff that I went through with my dad. Taking care of him. I'm not saying you need to take care of a dying person to be a good mom, but me, with my personality, I had very little patience. I have so much patience with my screaming 2-year-old now. It's almost insane. Like, by now I would have lost my mind. Had I had to deal with a 2-year-old arguing with me whether she is going to have the green pouch or the purple pouch for breakfast. Like,
what's in the pouch?
It's like puree foods, but like,
me and Bobby don't have kids, obviously, as we know. Sound like pouch? Like, what?
It's how she gets her veggies and fruits,
right,
without a headache.
So, do you have any advice to those who are maybe
on the outside?
Yeah, to those going through this right now, or even if they lost someone 10 years ago, like what have you found that's been helpful for you to help you deal with this?
So I think a big thing for me, one, counseling. That has helped me a lot. But
when did you get involved in that, if I can ask?
Literally, well, with my dad, like literally right after. But I've been in and out of counseling since I was in 8th grade.
We always plug therapy here. We're big fans. So
yeah, I am very, very big on therapy, medication, whatever makes you feel good, do you. But also what has helped me is writing about it on social media, actually. And I've talked about this with Katie before, how I feel like people don't like to be vulnerable on social media because, like, someone's going to read the post and be like, another post about her dad? Like, seriously? Like, we get it. He died. She's sad. Why is she still like moaning about it on social media? And, you know, that has helped me. I'm not writing it for other people to see. I'm writing it and posting it because it helps me. I could care less whether you like it, comment on it, anything like that. I think it's so important for you to just find like what helps you and not give a fuck what other people think. Because like we've talked about, this time in particular is a super hard time for me. So on memories on Facebook or Time Hop, it's like all pictures of my dad from 3 years ago around our wedding or him really sick, and like all those emotions come flooding back to me. So if I'm posting something, it's because it's helping me. It's not meant to help anyone else.
And I think another piece of that too, why we decided to bring you on, we've been talking about this for quite a bit, besides my procrastination, which but knowing you personally, you really do well with helping others and kind of doing things that feel like they might have a purpose. And I would hope those listening to this, like, this can help someone, even if it's one person one time for 1 minute, making them feel like, okay, like I felt that too and I'm not alone. So we did kind of position this at a time that would distract you from that. So I think for you, I've seen as your friend finding things to get involved in that will bring some kind of good from this. Like we do a walk every October, November for lung cancer, which you've actually gotten really involved in too.
Yeah, I'm very much involved. Lung Cancer Research Foundation. It's a wonderful nonprofit that has helped me tremendously, from organizing it to raising money for it, to getting the team together, getting shirts together. This past year it went virtual, so I had to figure out, where are we going to go? Like, where are we going to walk as a team? Where's everyone going to feel safe? That keeps my mind super busy and helps me a lot, because
almost like gives you like a purpose. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And like, everyone has, at some point in their life, they're going to have a cancer story, whether it's them, someone close to them. It's unfortunate, but it's everywhere. And like, you can't escape it at this point. Like, it's like, so whether or not, like, I know someone else whose dad has lung cancer, like, it doesn't matter, because if they see what I'm saying, they can still feel something about it. You know what I mean? Like, they're still going to feel something. They're still going to understand it. Like, even if it's not lung cancer or cancer in general, like heart disease, like, everyone has to come across these things at some point in their life.
Death is inevitable.
Exactly.
So knowing that, you know, I know you pretty well. I think helping people is a big part of who you are, and it really, in turn, ends up helping you in return. So are you comfortable with people reaching out to you about questions and stuff like that regarding this topic and loss and just all that kind of things?
Yeah, absolutely.
So feel free to plug your Instagram or whatever you want to plug.
My Instagram is at Nicole Albor.
You might want to spell that one for everybody.
No spaces. NicoleAllebach.
I hope everyone got that.
I was trying to follow along, and I was like, B-A... what?
and this is your best friend. You still can't spell it.
I do want to say before we wrap it up that I am a firm believer in the universe giving you what you need when you need it. And it turns out the day that this episode airs is the day of your dad's birthday. So happy birthday to Chuck Albor.
Shout out to Chuck. I love it.
We miss you and we love you, and I'm just so happy that, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. We haven't talked about it this in depth since, I mean, maybe ever. I think we went through it together, but we haven't talked about it, so it's hard, and you kept it together pretty well. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I think this is the first time I've ever actually spoke about it verbally as in depth as I have, and it was very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, it's a tough topic to unpack for yourself and for others to listen to. And we can't thank you enough, for doing that. In the meantime, feel free to follow the Instagram page at Irregular Podcast. Also, feel free to follow my personal page, which is at YoBob, EYOOO_BOB. If you're not following by now, then you're just, you're kind of a nerd. Whatever.
You can follow me, and you're not a nerd if you don't. You're just really cool if you do. It's at Katie_ANI. It's KAITY. If you listened to last episode, you better know how to spell my fucking name. _ANI.
Oh my gosh, that was the longest Instagram plug I've ever heard in my life.
Just gotta keep it a little toxic, you know. It's just who I am.
Don't threaten our listeners.
All right, guys. Thank you. We will see you next week. We love you.
Love you.